Amen. Jesus asked the questions. Do you have eyes but fail to see? Do you have ears but fail to hear? When I graduated from college, undergrad, I finished up at UC Riverside. And in those days, Riverside was close to what I referred to at the time as Can't Breathe Ardino. The smog was unbelievable. I didn't understand this when I transferred from UC Santa Cruz, of all places, to UC Riverside. One of the wildest decisions I've ever made. You should not trust me based on that decision. But anyway, got to Riverside and discovered that basically I was smoking 2 or 3 packs of cigarettes every day without ever buying the cigarettes. It was unbelievable. But I wound up having a good time and wound up loving it, except for the air. But anyway, when I finished at UC Riverside, I packed my things and I was on the road within an hour of my last final. Back to Santa Cruz where I could breathe. Anyway, my parents, however, I finished a quarter early, and then June came around, and my parents said, well, you have to go to graduation. I go, I don't want to go back there. I like breathing. But they said, oh, we really want to go to your graduation. I go, okay. So we went to graduation at UC Riverside, which turned out, again, to be a nice time. Seeing fellow students, etc. But then came time for at the graduation. Came time for the graduation address, the commencement speech, which was given by Joan Didion, who the famous social critic and of California's culture and America's culture, remarkable woman. I never heard of her at the time. I didn't know who she was. I had no clue, but she spoke, and I remember sitting there and just being, basically my mouth hung open. I'm like, whoa, this is not what I expected. This is deep. This is something very important and special that I'm listening to. I don't know if I get it fully, but I do know that this is important. You ever had that moment, these moments where you know something is profound, but you're not sure why it's profound, or you know it's working on you from inside somehow. That was her speech. Never forgot that effect that it had on me. Well, it turns out that speech got lost, right? She gave the transcript to the university, and the university lost it. This is before, the internet, right? Pieces of paper lost in the shuffle. And then about 10 years ago, someone discovered it and read it and thought, this is kind of a big deal. This is an important speech. And they put it up online, and then it became, actually now it's one of her most important writings in her corpus of work, believe it or not. So I revisited this recently. And I'm glad I did, because it's deep. Here's some of her speech. I've had to struggle my whole life against my own misapprehensions, my own false ideas, my own distorted perceptions. I've had to work very hard, make myself unhappy, give up ideas that made me comfortable, trying to apprehend social reality. I've spent my entire adult life, it seems to me, in a state of profound culture shock. I wish I were unique in this, but I am not. You may not be afflicted with my misapprehensions, and I may not be afflicted with yours. But none of this starts tabula rasa, blank slate. We all distort what we see. We all have to struggle to see what's really going on. That's the human condition, providing the human is awake and living in the world, which, by the way, is not as automatic as you might think. Some of you are going to spend the rest of your life in culture shock. And what I'm saying today is that I think you all should. I'm talking about trying not to be crippled by ideas. I'm talking about looking out at the world and trying to see it straight, about making that effort to look out for the rest of your life. And by living in the world, I mean really trying to see it, look at it, trying to make connections. And that's not easy. It takes work. You have to keep stripping yourself down, examining everything you see, getting rid of whatever is blinding you. And sometimes when you get rid of what is blinding you, you get your eyes opened, and you don't like what you see at all. And that's the risk. It's much easier to live in a world you imagined, where springs do not fail. A world in which the questions fit the answers, and the answers fit the questions, and the connections are already made. A world in which everything fits neatly into some idea or ideology. But that kind of world is only easier for a little while. It cripples people who live in it, and it's dangerous in a bad way. It's dangerous to society, it's dangerous to your own soul, and sometimes it's even physically dangerous. The words of the social prophet Joan Didion. This week we heard words from another prophet, yes? Bishop Budd in Washington, speaking to the president and the vice president and their entourage. And we know what she said, asking the president for mercy. Yes? Asking for mercy for the trans and the gay people in our midst and for the migrants in our midst. So we know that, but what we might not know is the rest of what she said, which was profound. Yes? Also. And here's an excerpt from her sermon before she got to the request for mercy from the president. She said, "We make mistakes. We say and do things that we later regret. We have our blind spots and our biases, and perhaps we are most dangerous to ourselves and others when we are persuaded without a doubt that we are absolutely right and someone else is absolutely wrong. Because then we're just a few steps from labeling ourselves as the good people versus the bad people. And the truth is that we're all people. We're both capable of good and bad." Alexander Solzhenitsyn once astutely observed that the line separating good and evil passes not through states, not between classes, nor through political parties, but rather right through the human heart, through all human hearts. And the more we realize this, the more room we have within ourselves for humility and openness to one another across our differences. Because in fact, we are more like one another than we realize. Bishop Budd. Thank you. Lately, I've been steeping myself a lot in the writings of Simone Weil. Those of us who are part of our contemplative practice group online every Wednesday, 5 to 6 p.m. Be there, be square. We've been focusing on Simone Weil for a while. She was a French philosopher, not a religious person, but one day in the mid-20th century, she stumbled into a Catholic church and she fell in love with Christianity and was never the same after that. Never got baptized, did not have orthodox views on the Christian faith, didn't fit into any category of Christianity really at all, except she became a very important Christian theologian in her own way. And she has things to say about this whole topic of seeing things clearly, right? Having eyes, but do they see? Having ears, but do they hear? She had this to say. Here are a few of her epigrams. Attention, taken to its highest degree, is the same thing as prayer. Attention, taken to its highest degree, is the same thing as prayer. It presupposes faith and love. Absolutely unmixed attention is prayer. Extreme attention is what constitutes the creative faculty in people, and the only extreme attention is religious. She says, the wrong way of seeing is to fix the attention on a problem. We must not want to find the solution to the problem. We should draw back before the object we are pursuing. Only an indirect method is effective. We must try to love without imagining. To love the appearance in its nakedness without interpretation. What we love then is truly God. Joy is the overflowing consciousness of reality. Sit with that one. Her method of investigation. As soon as we have thought something, try to see in what way the contrary is true. Talk about these passages over coffee. Yes? What I say about Simone Weil is whatever, all her books, they're the kind of books where you want to take your yellow highlighter and basically highlight the whole thing, all of it. And her sentences are the kind of sentences that you need to soak in water for about a week before you can consume them, that kind of thing. Some of what Jesus had to say is in the same category. But the bottom line is attention. Attention to anything. Anything. Anything at all. Attention, when you go the distance with attention, when you really open your eyes and your heart and your mind and your ears, that is prayer. It's the same thing as prayer. Because then what we're attending to, we're drawn into the divinity within it. Fernando Pessoa, my favorite Portuguese poet. Do you have a favorite Portuguese poet? Probably not. Anyway, I fell in love with him, his stuff when Roberta and I were in Portugal about a year and a half ago. And he had this to say about the subject. He says, what matters is to know how to see. How to see without thinking. To know how to see when seeing. And not think when seeing. Not see when thinking. To come to reality without presuppositions, right? Without prejudices, without fixed opinions. To be open to what is as it is on its terms. He wrote this poem. He was actually very fluent in English, and he wrote some of his poetry in English. This one I really love, and it's another one you got to soak in water for a while to really appreciate. It's called Inversion. Here in this wilderness, each tree and stone fills me with the sadness of a great glee. God in his all-togetherness is whole part of each stone and tree. An inner, outward seeingness makes my clear self unknown. Oh, Godfully alone. God in his overbeingness survives his death, each tree and every stone. I, in the barkness and the clodfulness of tree and sand and stone, God is only his own. God in all his godfulness, whose concrete soul is each thing's abstraction. That getting ourselves out of the way, getting our opinions and judgments and presuppositions and prejudices, getting them out of the way, when we get them out of the way, we have arrived at God. We are there with God. We are with God in all of God's godfulness. Let's be there so that we can see reality. Yes? So we can see what is. So we can see, as Joan Didion said, what's really going on. Amen.